Good evening, everyone. This is the December 11th, 2019 public hearing of the Evanston Plan Commission. The zoning ordinance directs this body to hear applications for map amendments, text amendments, plan developments, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term plans. This commission will make recommendations which will be sent to the City Council. The first order of business is taking a roll call of commissioners. Ms. Jones?
Commissioner Draper? Here. Commissioner Dubin? Commissioner Goddard? Commissioner Halleck? Here. Commissioner Isaac?
Here.
Commissioner Pagotzi? Here. Commissioner Sloss? Commissioner Hugo?
Okay, we have four members of 7 seated commissioners. Therefore, we have a quorum. Next order of business is approval of the meeting minutes of November 13th, 2019. Do I have any comments or revisions to the meeting minutes from the commissioners? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Any seconds? All in favor? Aye. All against? All right, the motion passes. Minutes of November 13th, 2019 are approved. At this point, we're going to go out of order. We're going to move to item 5, other business, the approval of the 2020 Plan Commission meeting schedule. For 2020, we are looking at having meetings on the second Wednesday of every month, with the fourth Wednesday being additional dates for spillover or for items that that can't be fit into our normal schedule. As of now, what we're looking at approving are meetings on January 8th, January 22nd, February 12th, February 26th, March 11th, April 8th, May 13th, June 10th, July 8th, August 12th, September 9th, October 14th, November 11th, and December 9th, all of 2020. Do I hear any comments or questions with respect to the proposed meeting schedule for the Plan Commission? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the meeting schedule? All in favor? Aye. All against? Okay, it passes. All right, moving on to old business. We have a text amendment and a map amendment, both with respect to a portion of what we're calling Emerson Street rezoning. At this point, I will inform the Commission that I am required to recuse myself from any discussions with respect to these items. I recused myself for the last meeting where these items came up, and I need to recuse myself for this meeting and any future meetings due to a family member of mine owning property in the rezoning area. As such, since we are at a bare quorum for this meeting, we do not have a quorum to move forward with any discussion with respect to any of the old business. As such, we need to move these items to a date certain. The next meeting is January 8th, 2020, and the one after that is January 22nd, 2020. Do we have a motion from the commissioners to set these two items to one of those two dates?
Another piece of information, Mr. Chair. At the last meeting, it was continued at the request of a property owner within the area. That property owner has informed us that they're not available on the 8th of January.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mingham. So do I have a motion from the commissioners? January 22nd?
Sure. January 22nd. I move that we postpone or table the.
Can you proceed?
Okay. I move that we have a continuance on this topic until January 22nd, 2019,
2020?
2020.
Okay.
Yeah, 2020. Very good.
Do I have a second for that motion? Okay, it being seconded, all in favor? Aye. All against? All right, it passes. Moving on to new business. January 22nd, 2020. That'll be Wednesday at 7 PM. The next order of business is item 4A on the agenda, plan development at 999 through 1015 Howard Street. It is item number 19 PLND-0089 and 19 PLND-0090. Staff, who is going to be presenting?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Plan Commissioners, members of the public. This is a request for a plan development at 999 to 1015 Howard Street. The applicant is requesting a special use as a plan development to construct a 4-story, 73,000 plus square foot building addition to the existing CJE Senior Life. This would be to allow 60 units of affordable housing for seniors. Site development allowances are requested for the 5 items shown on the screen, including a building height of 51 feet, where 45 feet is allowed within the B2 zoning district, to reduce the required interior side yard setback for parking to 0 feet, where 5 feet is required along the east property line, to reduce the required rear yard setback for parking to 0 feet, where 15 feet is required from the north property line when adjacent to a residential district, which this property is, and to reduce the required number of off-street parking spaces from 69 to 55. And finally, a newer request that came up at the DAPR meeting was to allow a loading berth with a vertical clearance of 11 feet 10 inches, where a minimum clearance height of 14 feet is required by code. The property site is shown in the crosshatched area on the screen. It's located west of Ridge on Howard Street. Encompasses the existing CJE building with the red dot on this portion of the screen, as well as the open parking and the former commercial fast food restaurant building, Dairy Queen at one time. The site's a little under an acre in size, about 0.9 acres. The CJE Senior Life Adult Day Service Center is existing and would remain, and the apartments would be for seniors ages 62 and older with incomes at or below 60% of area median income. Be a total of 60 dwelling units, 54 of those as 1-bedrooms and 6 2-bedroom units, and a stated 55 parking spaces for staff, residents, and visitors, with a total building height of 51 feet for the 4-story building and a compliant FAR of 1.88. Rendering is shown of the proposed development. I'm sure the applicant's presentation may have more information. This is the first floor plan, shows 2 curb cuts. Easternmost curb cut leads to parking at ground level and then ramps down to parking. The westernmost curb cut enters and then ramps up to parking level. The existing CGE building is on the western portion of the site. Some community spaces for the residential building along the street frontage there. So the site development allowances that are requested are shown on the screen. The base requirements are shown in this first column. 45 feet height, where 51 feet is is proposed. Up to 57 could be requested as a site development allowance. So none of these requests exceed the maximum site development allowance. And it is stated the side yard for setback is being requested and the rear yard setback for parking. And then the number of parking spaces as well as the clear height of the loading dock. The applicant has presented the following public benefits as part of their development. It allows for the rehabilitation of the existing building, improves the aesthetics of this section of Howard Street through storefront glass and activating 175 feet of frontage at a pedestrian scale. They also state that the development is designed to simultaneously create vertical physical improvements to the site by creative facade and glasswork. An improvement is the programmed outdoor terrace on the second floor. Development addresses city's housing goals to provide affordable housing and target the senior population. Replaces a vacant structure previously occupied by fast food establishments to improve the site, block, and surroundings. Addition of dwellings on this section of Howard Street will provide enhanced de facto security with additional eyes on the street. Additionally, that the CJE is a nonprofit organization whose existing building will be incorporated in the new development. CJE currently holds tax-exempt status as a nonprofit. Under the new ownership structure, they'll be leasing from a general partnership, and its tax-exempt status will not carry through, allowing the commercial property to rejoin the property tax rolls. Another stated public benefit is efficiently using the site while improving circulation, reducing the number of curb cuts from 3 to 2, and accommodating the buses that are used on site. And then finally, that'll meet the LEED Silver certification or higher, and also meet IDA's sustainable design requirements, as well as receiving an eligibility letter from ComEd's energy efficiency program to reduce energy use. The staff and DAPR has recommended approval of the plan development, subject to several conditions of approval. That the applicant continues to work on the design details, particularly on the east and west building elevations. Approval of a construction management plan, addressing garbage and waste management services further, having a approved list of street trees shown on landscape plans, providing a snow removal plan, and revising plans to show the public sidewalk extending through the driveways off Howard Street. This request is subject to standards for plan developments found in the sections shown on the screen. And we do have all those standards available when the commission gets to deliberations, that portion of it. That concludes a summary of the staff report. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. A few administrative things before we move on. Number one, I have a sign-up sheet. If anyone from anyone in the public that would like to speak that hasn't signed up, I'm going to put this right up here. You guys can just come in and sign up. Sorry. One other thing is at the beginning of this item, I referenced this as 19 PLND 0089 and 0090. It is in fact 19 PLND -0012. So at this time, do any of the Plan Commission members have any questions for staff based on the outline that was presented? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the petitioner's testimony regarding this application. We're working through some technology issues. I think we'll be ready in a minute.
keyboard? Or is it?
There's a folder on there that says 1015 Howard Street. Yeah. That top one's a PDF, yeah. Or you can do, well, either one. Great. You want to do full screen? Control L.
That is keyboards down.
Right. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Plan Commission. Mr. Mangum, thank you very much for your time. My name is David Block. I'm the Director of Development for Evergreen Real Estate Group. And we're here to present what we think is a really exciting project for an underutilized, underdeveloped location on the south edge of Evanston. I have a number of members of my team here today. If I could ask everybody over there to stand up. And so we have representatives here from CJE Senior Life, the Council on Jewish Elderly. They are our development partners in this project, and they own the building at 1015 Howard Street and the land that's the parking lot. And I also have our design team here from Urban Works. And we have our traffic consultant here from Erickson Engineering, and we have our land use attorney here from Applegate and Thorne Thompson as well. So if there are specific questions that I can't answer, I'm sure somebody on our team can help me answer them. So thank you all. This is a project that has actually been about 2 years in the making, and we formed a partnership with CJE actually quite a few years ago. CJE is a 50-year-old almost social service organization that serves not just Jewish elders, but really senior citizens of all walks of life, primarily on the north side of Chicago and in Evanston and in the immediate north suburbs. And so we've worked with CJE since 2014 or so. We've worked with them to purchase and recapitalize some of the buildings that they own in Rogers Park. And when we first started talking to them about this site, I think it really became an exciting opportunity for all of us. This building was a former AMP supermarket and has served as the home for CJE's adult day services program for almost 30 years. This is a program that provides a safe and secure and caring environment for seniors with dementia. And as the name implies, it is only a day services program. So seniors are not here overnight. Their families sometimes drop them off, or there are buses. You've probably seen the Shalom buses that are parked on the site. Buses travel all over the north side of Chicago and the near north suburbs to pick up seniors from their families and bring them to 1015 Howard Street. And it is an 8:30 to 5 o'clock program that has art programs, that has social programming for these seniors. It has sort of emotional support for this group, and then the program also provides some meals for these seniors. And there are about 40 or so seniors who are participating in this program every day. It's open Monday through Friday. And so this seemed to us like a wonderful opportunity to combine services with a longtime social service agency for seniors who really needed quite a bit of care and attention with a housing program designed to serve independent seniors. So what we're proposing is not necessarily housing that some people think of as assisted living, which in some cases is where the seniors who live, who attend this program live. But this is for independent seniors who we expect will be active participants in the street life and the economic life of Howard Street, of Rogers Park, of Southeast Evanston, and really help revitalize that corner of the city. So we thought it was a great combination, and we're excited to be CJE's partner here. So if we could just move to the next slide, please. So this is our team. Urban Works has been in business for 25 years. Its two partners are longtime Evanston residents. I'm also an Evanston resident of about 13 years, and so we have a very Evanston-focused team here. Next slide, please. Just to give you a quick sense of who we are as a developer, Evergreen Real Estate Group, we are a for-profit, primarily but not exclusively affordable housing developer. You may have seen some of our buildings around the north side of the city. We've done two of the pretty highly publicized combined library senior housing projects in Rogers Park and Irving Park. And then the project on the bottom right corner of the screen is in Albany Park, and I put that slide up there because it's an example of a mural project that we did, 48-unit family housing project with a really cool mural that turned out really nice. So we'll come back to that in just a second. Next slide. So you've seen the pictures of the site already. There are some images of the building and the condition. It's not a great building. Never has been a great building. Like I said, it was a former supermarket. The condition of the street facade is both a little tired and architecturally pretty dated. And so part of the benefit of this project, part of our design intention, is to help clean up the street facades along that stretch of Howard Street and make this a more inviting pair of buildings as we move forward. Next, please. So just very quickly, 60 apartments total, a mix of 1- and 2-bedroom units, 54 one-bedroom units, 6 two-bedroom units. We'll be renovating CJE's program space as part of this. This is 100% affordable housing. And so the rents will range from about $400 to just over $1,000 a month, and will serve senior singles and couples or potentially seniors with a caregiver with family income up to about $43,000 a year. We also have units where seniors will pay no more than 30% of their income. So, for example, if somebody has a Social Security income of $1,000 a month, that tenant could pay $300 a month. As mentioned earlier, the property will pay property taxes. CJE is now tax exempt. The Dairy Queen property does pay taxes, about $13,000 a year. This will put that entire stretch on the tax rolls, and we're projecting about $75,000 of tax income this year anyway. So I'm sure that all of you have heard about the need for affordable housing in Evanston, and that's really part of the reason why we're doing this. You know, why here, why now? Big focus of the City Council on affordable housing, big focus on the redevelopment, the reinvestment in Howard Street, and so we saw this as a terrific combination that brings those things together. Next, please. Next. So wanted to just talk you through the building and kind of the features of the building. I have my laser pointer here. So what you see here, this is the plan at street level. So the current building is right here. CJE's property extends roughly to here. And so the rest of this over on this side is where the Dairy Queen is. As mentioned, we'll be going from 3 curb cuts to 2 curb cuts. This is the current location of the existing curb cut used by CJE. So right now, this entire parcel is fenced off with a 6-foot fence. Currently, the buses and the visitors come into the site, and then there's a parking lot that they can come in and circulate around. Right now, there are 2 curb cuts at the Dairy Queen, and I think it was designed to be a loop. So originally, cars would come in. There was some kind of drive-through ordering system, drive around to the back, and come out onto the street this way. So we think this is a significant improvement in traffic safety for this situation. It's a tight site in a lot of ways. It's actually a relatively narrow site. If you can see the dimensions there, it's 400 feet long, but the site itself is only less than 100 feet wide. And we know that there is a need to accommodate parking both for the existing CJE programming and for the new residential building. So we needed to come up with a parking strategy that dealt with these dimensions head on. So what we've come up with is essentially two parallel slanting parking deck configuration. And as we get to that part of the presentation, I'll show you a diagram that might be a little easier to understand than this flat plan. What you're looking at now is actually the street level, and what you have to imagine is that this piece is slanting up at, I don't know, 15 degrees, 10 degrees, something like that. So it's slanting up this way. So you come into the site here and drive up and circulate around and down and out. And so the top part of the deck is for the existing vans that CJE operates, and these are 12-passenger vans, and also for some visitors. Generally, it's a small number of visitors, family members, or occasionally social workers who come to the site to help with the care. But those are for occasional visitors. What you don't see on this plan is that this piece of the site is actually lower. I don't know the exact depth, but I want to say it's about 11 feet lower than this edge of the parking ramp. And so you're below there, but you're at street grade here. You come in here and you go down, and I'll show you the lower level plan in just a moment. So you see that all along the street we have the functions that are ancillary to a residential building, multifamily building. Our lobby is over here. The main entrance is over here in this corner. We have our management office, kind of a receiving area, the mailroom, and then senior activity rooms, a fitness room, kind of library reading room, laundry for the building, and then ancillary mechanical and electrical spaces in the back. The trash pickup, which was referenced in the report, there's a deck here, so this is a stairway that is leading to the deck that's above this area. The trash right now is shown back here, and we've done some thinking about that, and we can talk about that in a moment. But right now, all of the services for the existing CJE building are off the alley in the back, and we think we have some ideas for making sure that the services for the new building are easily managed. Next slide, please. This is the lower level of the parking deck, and so you can see you come in here and then you circulate down and up, so essentially this entire portion is below grade. And the building is essentially a slab-on-grade building. There is a small vestibule with a stairway and an elevator that leads off of that lower level of the garage for access down there. But the building is really above this at grade level. And we do have, and this is, I guess, one of the adjustments we need to make. The parking is right up against the edge of the building, but this is screened behind a wall of the building. So the wall comes down to grade all the way across. So there is parking, but there's parking, it's essentially behind a wall of the building that entire length. Next slide, please. This is then going up to the second level of the building, and so you see that there's a slope. So the slope kind of comes up to the second level here. This is why it's shown dotted. And in order to provide all the necessary clearances, the building is actually set back from the deck here. So it's essentially a single loaded corridor building on the second floor. And I'll show you a building section. By the time you get to the third floor, you have enough clearance so that you can actually do a double loaded corridor. So at the end of the corridor, this structure here, which will connect the existing CJE building to the new building, we call the bridge, and that'll be a seating area. It's kind of a gathering lobby space within the building, and then there's a secondary lobby that leads to the outdoor deck. And the outdoor deck will serve both the residents of this building and CJE's clients. So there'll be a new elevator installed that will take CJE's clients up to that deck, and we will coordinate times. Because of security concerns, the CJE's facility is a secure facility. They have had occasions when the clients have tried to wander off, so there's a big security concern for adults with dementia. So this will be a secured deck. The egress stair here is behind an alarmed gate, and so in using this, this door will be locked, and CJE staff will control access to that upper level deck. But right now, if you've ever been to CJE's facility, their building is really hard up against the alley. There is this small, very narrow little space back there, and that is the only green space that's available to clients of the Adult Aid program. So we believe we're providing a much nicer outdoor amenity for the clients of the day program. Next one. So the third and fourth floor plans are just much more straightforward double odor corridor plans. The two-bedroom units are a little bit larger. They're at the end there. Here's that bridge lounge that continues on the second, third, and fourth floors. A pretty straightforward design, elevator here at the end, and then stairs where they need to be. Next slide. So here's that diagram that shows you a little more clearly what is going on with the parking situation. So on the top here, we are looking south across a cut through the building, and you can see this is above grade. This level right here is grade, so you're coming down below grade here. At this side, you're going under the building and actually circulating up and around the parking deck at this level. This side, we're looking north, so it's sort of the opposite view there, but I think you get the idea. Next slide. Here's a sectional view. Again, just a maybe a more technical view of that. I know there were concerns about making sure that headlights at that upper level deck are not impinging on any of the neighboring residential properties. So this is actually a 6-foot wall at the ramp, at the parking ramp, so that there is no way for any of the headlights to sort of bleed over onto the neighboring property there. You can see where the alley was. This is the alley. So where it says residential, these are actually where the garages are at the back of the alley. These are the elevations of the property. So the Howard Street side, the north side of the building, and then the east and west side. This is a precast concrete building, and we do that for a couple of reasons. For cost reasons, because this is affordable housing and because our budget and our construction sources are regulated by IDA, we have fairly strict cost constraints that we need to abide by, and so precast is an efficient and a rapid way of building a building like this, and so we've asked the design team to use a variety of tools to kind of soften what can be a bit of a harsh look for precast, and we think they've actually, after multiple iterations, and so Dapper has really helped us in this regard, we think that we've succeeded in sort of softening and breaking down the scale of this building in a way that is more in keeping with the neighborhood. The green items that you see here, those are actually living walls, so it's a kind of metal mesh that is in front of, that's probably a concrete backer element, and they're actually living plants that are going up and down those items. We've used those elements, and the architects have used those elements successfully in other places. They do die back in the winter, but they come back every spring, and it does create a sort of different and always varying look on the building. And then the vertical slats here and horizontal slats, and the horizontal slats up here, we're using wood or a wood-like product. It's possible that we would use a product that is a kind of manufactured wood like Trex, which is very durable and low maintenance, to provide a wood look that actually is in keeping with this. If you look at the CJE building now, it has this somewhat dated pretend board and batten look, and I think at one time there were clear story windows that were part of the store, They're since blocked up, so we will open up those clear story windows there. People have asked us if we can open up storefront and create a storefront experience, and we do have storefront along here, so to provide some visual access from the street into the building. Again, the security issues at the CJA program don't allow us to do that there. Next slide. So here's the rendering looking east. Again, here's the area where there's currently the board and batten. You can see where we're opening up the clear story windows, using the wood as an element to wrap the corner, using the windows and the wood to wrap the corner, have these window enclosures that are going around. So we're using the wood elements to bridge between the windows and again try to break down the scale of the building. Right now we're showing at the corner a similar condition to what I showed you at the top of the presentation, where it's a corner that's kind of cut back, and we can use public art as a way to enliven that entrance back there. So this is the curb cut, and you go in here, drive in, and drive up the ramp there. Next slide, please. This is the other end of the building, and so this is where the Dairy Queen is now. You drive in here and go down into the below grade parking. Next slide. This is the alley view, and so this is actually the back of the parking deck. And you can see that we have very deliberately pushed the building forward toward Howard Street. Even though in this B2 district we are not required to do that, we thought that was the appropriate approach to this building, and it also helped us solve some scale problems with dealing with the parking versus the building. And so this is really only effectively about a 1-story or maybe a 1.5-story wall up against this, and it steps up about 40 or 50 feet south of the property. So we are effectively stepping quite a bit back from the alley. Next view. So, as noted at the top of the presentation, we have 5 requests. I guess the first request is implicit. Plan development is a special use, so we need the Plan Commission to approve the special use here. And then the 5 technical requests. The east side setback for parking from 5 feet to 0. All of that parking is within the building, so it's not like there's surface parking that's exposed at the property line there. Same with the rear setback for parking. Again, it's contained within the building, so in this zone from 15 feet to 0, but this is all within the parking deck, and it will be behind the wall, so the neighbors will never see the parking from the alley or their properties. Increase the height from 45 feet to 51 feet. The off-street parking from 69 total down to 55 total parking spaces on both decks. And then the loading dock that we have from 14 feet down to, I think, 11 feet or 11 feet 10. I don't, that may be short 10 inches there. And that's really so that we don't have to raise the overall height of the building by another 3 feet to accommodate our structural system. So those are our requests, and we're happy to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the commission?
First of all, I think it's a really nice looking project and very clever use of the site with the massing. I think that's to be complimented. I think the architects did a really nice job. I have a few questions. Could you, well, let me go through a couple of them. One is, could you get into more detail on why this number of parking spaces works for you? I know you cited the document cites comps and all of that, but explain why those comps are relevant to what we have here. And then on the loading, don't people, is independent living, so people are going to move in and out. So when people move in and out, they usually use moving vans. And don't those moving vans require a 14-foot clearance? And then the third question is, great job on shielding the lighting of the parking from the neighbors, but there's that outdoor deck. What kind of lighting is on that outdoor deck, and is that going to shine on the neighbors? So those are my three areas.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'll probably take those in reverse order because I think it's the first question is probably the more detailed explanation. The lighting on the deck, we're looking at low cutoff lighting. So we will make sure we can do a lighting study if necessary, but the idea is to make sure that the light is not effectively escaping from that deck. And so, some of it would actually be uplighting from the deck to the building, so there's almost indirect light that bounces off the back of the building to help illuminate the deck. I can show you pictures of the roof deck amenity that we did for the Independence Library Housing Project. It's kind of a similar, smaller scale, but a similar lighting approach where the lighting is actually pretty carefully thought out to both light the building, illuminate the building, but also not unnecessarily illuminate the neighboring properties. So we'll make sure we're paying attention to that. The second question, what was your second question? Oh, the loading dock height.
Loading that clearance.
Yeah. So we talked about this at DAPR, and we've actually done the research that all of the small and mid-size moving vans that people are likely to use. So we looked at U-Haul, we looked at their standards, we looked at FedEx and the kind of trucks that FedEx and UPS use. All of those trucks will clear the 11-foot 10. The only trucks that won't are semi-tractor trailers. Remember that this is affordable housing, and these are one with a handful of two-bedroom units. That is, moving with a tractor trailer, because I've done it several times, is a very expensive way to move. And in doing this for 20 years, I have never seen a low-income senior use even a part-load tractor trailer to move into one of our developments. They're almost always either using U-Haul or they're having their kids and their grandkids stick the stuff in the back of a station wagon. So we think it is highly unlikely that anybody will need to use a tractor trailer in this site. As far as the parking count is concerned, we essentially tried to get as many parking spaces into the site as we could. We knew that parking was a concern, not just for the neighbors, but for CJE, we had to accommodate their buses, we have to accommodate their visitors, we have to accommodate their staff, and for the residents of the building. And again, I'm proud of the work that our team has done. I think that we have maximized on a fairly tricky site the number of parking spaces that we can get. And part of the reason that we provided those comparables is we wanted to do a gut check of whether we have met the basic requirements that we expect that our tenants will need. And if you look at the comparables provided in there, and actually if, Scott, if you want to go to the, I think it's 2 slides in. Nope, go back toward the end of the presentation. Yeah, one more. That one. So this table was in your handout, and so we benchmarked this project against 4 of our own properties, 3 senior, 1 family, and then 3 existing properties in Evanston, 2 senior and 1 family. And we found that the total number of parking spaces that we're providing, especially for the residential, is well within the bounds of what is being provided. And we have to think that the transit access on this site is every bit as good, if not better, than it is at any of the other sites that we have listed here. Again, in 20 years of doing this, I have never seen a parking lot in the senior buildings that I do completely full. The low-income seniors just don't have cars for the most part, or if they do have cars, they don't all have cars, and typically it's around a third. We've provided kind of a margin of safety to get them above that.
Quick question, clarification regarding parking. So the parking accommodation took into account the CJE requirement?
That's right.
Okay. So the ask, does it, the the required parking, was that just for the residential, or did that include the requirements for the CJE?
It did include the CJE requirements. I think it was a two-part calculation in the staff report. The staff report looked at, for the CJE facility, they looked at total number of vehicles, so number of vans, which is actually 11 in our case, and number of staff. And then it looked at the number of housing units, and there's a formula, and I think it's 0.75 spaces per senior housing unit, but there was an allowance under the inclusive housing ordinance. So I think the 69 units total was the staff calculation, and so we're asking for relief down to 55.
Got it, thanks.
Any other questions from members of the commission? Okay. All right.
Just looking at some of the site photos, it looks like there's some pretty substantial utility poles along the north side of the site. Are those going to be buried? Because right now, if you're going right along the property boundary, it's going to hit them.
Are they on the other side of the alley, or are they on our side of the alley?
They're
Yeah.
huge.
So we'll need to accommodate utility relocation there. Typically, we will work around existing utilities. We're not going into the alley, obviously, and so those poles are in the alley.
It looks as though they're actually they're wide enough that they're going to be encroaching in where your building is touching.
So, if that's the case, then we'll need to do some relocation with the utilities affected, so.
You mentioned that Dapper, or someone mentioned that Dapper approved the project with comments. The pictures that we saw, the renderings, do those include the Dapper comments or not? And if they don't, could you point out what is going to be changed because of the Dapper comments?
Actually, go back to the alley view. Yeah, so I think probably the most robust conversation that we had at Dapper was about garbage. And what the trash pickup configuration is like. So right now, the way the site plan works is that this is the CJE building, and we had set aside an area of trash pickup for both CJE and for the residential building, kind of behind this screened area. And there was concern on the part of Dapper participants that the haulers would have a hard time, and that even if this were a nice sliding gate to let the haulers get in there, that there wouldn't be enough access for them. And so actually our team was literally out this morning on site with Groot, the hauler that CJE uses, and they'll very likely be the hauler that we use there, talking about some potential configurations. So if you can move to the very last slide, there are some alternatives that we looked at. Yeah, so again, these are blow-up views in the configuration that you have in your packet. All of the trash was actually to the west of this location, but after having this conversation with the haulers, our team came up with two alternative scenarios where this is just north of the loading area, and again, we have enough room to accommodate the loading berth. This is all inside our garage space. We would create a second a movable fence just for the residential. CJE would continue to have their trash and recycling and composting in this area, or we could potentially create a consolidated area for both uses. So we're still studying those two. But we think either one of those is probably an improvement over what Dapper saw initially. I guess one of the other things that Dapper talked about was the use of solar energy, renewable energy here. As noted, the building will end up being a LEED Silver building, so that's an improvement. We have begun the qualification process of this building for the ComEd Energy Efficient Affordable Housing Program, so there will be a benefit to the residents there. As far as using solar, we're in the process of starting conversations with Elevate Energy, who actually runs some programming for the city of Evanston now, to look at whether solar is a possibility. This is a good site for solar because it's got a long south exposure. And we have a, pretty long roof area to work with. But again, because we have a tight budget, if Elevate can help us find enough subsidy to pay for solar, we're happy to include it in the project. So that was one of Dapper's concerns. And then the last concern was this elevation, and the concern that compared to the rest of the building, it is relatively static, and there's not a lot going on that elevation. And I guess my response to that is that this is up against the property line. This is also a structural shear wall for the building. And so we are limited in what we can do. We will not have windows on that wall. We can't, because if the way the building works now, if we were to try to pull it back far enough to avoid the issue in the building code that would require fire glazing, we would end up losing about 6 units, and we can't reduce the unit program. And if we were to try to put windows in there, fire glazing is extraordinarily expensive. It would probably add $250,000 to the budget that simply is not available under the affordable housing programs. So, we've talked about different ways by using form liner for the precast concrete panels. You can see there is a small area of form liner indicated there. Potentially some of the same sort of wood or wood look wrap around there, but one of our concerns is that if we take all those steps to embellish that side of the building, the neighboring property owner tomorrow could submit a proposal to build a 5-story building right at that corner. And so it's an urban condition, it's an urban party wall condition, and I guess my view is it kind of is what it is.
Okay, I have a few questions. With respect to CJA's current activities at the site, are those activities going to be expanded as a result of this development? Just their normal activities at the current building? Is there going to be more there as a result?
I mean, my answer is no, but maybe Laura or Tom, you want to come address that?
You're going to need to come to it's just so everyone on TV, everyone at home can hear what you're saying.
So I'll just introduce myself. I'm Laura Proha, Vice President of Community Services at CJE Senior Life, so ADS is one of the programs under my purview. The plan is to continue the ADS program as it currently exists. After the renovations, as David had stated, that there will be some renovations to our property. Some of it will be a new roof, a new HVAC system, and we're also going to reconfigure the internal space to really enhance the type of program we're currently providing to our clients. But we don't anticipate increasing the number of clients that we serve. We are actually built to manage up to 50 clients. We're averaging 35 to 40 a day. If we can increase the number of clients, we would love to be able to do that. But it'll still continue to exist as a day program with the building open between 8 and 5 and clients in the building between 9:30 and 3:30 Monday through Friday.
And do you have 22 staff on site right now?
We do, because we have the adult day services staff, and we also have the bus drivers, because this is not just the location for adult day services program, but it is the base for our transportation system. So our drivers are also there and park their cars.
And so you have the 11 vans and 22 staff, which includes the drivers that will either they'll park their cars if they're driving there and then take the vans.
Correct.
With the addition of the residential portion of this project, how much additional staff do you believe you're going to have?
It won't impact our staff at all. The staff in the adult day program will be static.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know how much staff is going to be on site in the residential portion of the project?
Yeah, so at most, we will have two staff. We have a manager for a building like this, and we have a maintenance technician. And very often, that's a half-time position. If you know the Northtown Library and Housing Project, which is about a 5-minute drive or less from this site, right now, our property management plan is to have one manager share those two buildings, because between them, it's 44 units at the other building, it's 60 units here, it's only 104 units. That's a typical workload for one of our property managers. So it's likely to be a half-time manager and probably a full-time maintenance tech here.
So the two offices on the first floor, one will be for the maintenance person, one will be for the property manager?
Yeah, and typically we use one of those offices to interview prospective clients, to help them with their, they have to do an annual recertification of their rent, of their income and all of that. So it's actually a fairly generous office considering the size of the property.
Okay. And what is the average age that you're expecting of your residents?
So the age, the entry age point is 62 years old, but typically in our properties, our tenants for these independent living buildings are in their late 60s, early 70s. So these are still, fairly young and vibrant seniors.
Okay. The deck on the second floor of the project that's going to be facing the residential area, it's going to be used by both CJE and the residents. As far as the railing, I guess you'd say, facing the alley and then facing like the residences, and I understand that it looks like there's currently all the properties there have garages that are also act as a buffer between them and between your property and theirs. How high is that railing going to be? I mean, we're talking like, is it 42 inches? Is it going to be? I mean, are you going to be able? If someone's standing on the deck, are they going to be able to look out and over, or is it really enclosed?
It's actually a 6-foot. It's a 6-foot barrier, and part of that is for security purposes for CJE.
Right.
There are some seniors with dementia who get agitated and feel like they have to run away. So there are actually security procedures in place now. Their back fence is a 6-foot fence. It's actually
Okay.
higher than that, right?
Higher than that.
Yeah. So it might be a 6-foot concrete element with a little bit of above it to make sure we're not losing anybody going over the fence.
Got it. So the barrier between the deck and the alley is not going to be glass or
Correct.
anything where someone's looking in or someone else is looking out. Okay. Let's see. One of the comments we've gotten from the public, at least comments that have come in ahead of time, and we obviously haven't heard from the people that are here today, is that the parking for them is an issue. And in one of the comments that I read, they were told what they said was they were promised there'd be 67 parking spaces. And so I wanted to ask you, at any point in the community meetings that you've conducted or you've spoken to the community about this project, was there a promise of 67 spaces?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I can't imagine that I would promise something that I didn't think I could deliver.
Okay. And then right now, this project is being presented as 100% affordable, which obviously exceeds the requirements for the city of Evanston. Does that mean that you are you're willing to submit the building as 100% affordable, and thereby restricting it?
Yeah, I mean, in addition
Going
to whatever
forward?
City of Evanston restrictions, this will have a federal restriction on it. So it will be restricted to 100% affordable at multiple levels.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's see. Are there any other Any other questions from the commission? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. All right. Let's see. At this time, I am required to inform everyone here of the following. Persons or groups with an ownership interest in property that is located within 1,000 feet of this development, inclusive of public roads, streets, alleys, and other public ways, who wish to object can upon presenting the commission with a written request for continuance, obtain a continuance of this matter to a date certain. It will be a one-time continuance, and this matter will move forward through deliberations at that date certain. If anyone has wants to make a request of that, yes.
I do, but I don't have anything to write it on. What do you need? Because
Okay, I'm sorry. The reason for a continuance would be to present evidence to rebut the testimony that you heard from the applicant's presentation today. So it sounds like you'd like to make it that continuance.
yeah, Hi, I'm Lois Hedman, and I am a neighbor within 1,000 feet. And while I can't say that promises were made, I don't have a recording of our neighborhood meetings, but we're certainly led to believe that the parking and just all of these allowances were not going to be, asked for, that they were really going to try to work with the neighborhood. I think that is a quote, to really work with the neighborhood. So I would like to get this information back to the neighbors so that they can have an opportunity to know really what's changed about this, because it's changed dramatically, both in the size of it as well as the appearance of it, from what
Okay.
we are led to believe.
So I'm gonna ask the commission if we want to take a 2-minute recess, and during those 2 minutes, you can make a written written application for continuance, and we'll reconvene in 2 minutes. At this time, if someone makes a request for continuance, which this is the point in the meeting when someone would make that continuance request, if it's in proper form, if it's written, and the person lives within 1,000 feet of the project, we would set the rest of this hearing, of this item, to a date certain, and all public they would be the first person to speak at the continued meeting, and all other public comment would come after that.
I did have some questions, though. I just want to ask a couple of questions. When you did say that public comment would precede each of the items.
No, I'm sorry,
I just have a couple of questions.
Hold on one second.
Also for the residents, I mean, this is a question that
I understand. Excuse me. All right, so our rules state that we have questions of the petitioner, and then when questions are over, we move to public comment. If someone asks for a continuance, then the questioning portion of the matter cannot be finalized.
Yeah, and I can write it. I can write slow.
Right, can I still ask? I just have a couple of questions. I've stayed here all evening. I asked you ahead of time. You said you'd be able to ask questions before each item. I've been sitting here. I just have a couple of questions. Jesus. I mean, we're here, we're residents. You're here to serve us. Let's get clear your roles here, okay? Firstly, I just do have a question.
Excuse me. I understand you're here you're part of the public. We are part of the public too. We live here in Evanston.
Yeah, but you volunteered to serve, so serve.
I And that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Now,
My name
if-
is
if
Claire
you could
Kelly.
please-
I'm a 50-year resident, and I have a couple of questions about this project. Firstly, I want to ask, do you generally read Dapper's comments, or is it standard practice to have the developer debrief you on Dapper's comments?
Excuse me. The questions that you may ask are of the petitioner and their presentation, not of the commission.
Well, this is because you are asking the petitioner to debrief you on Dapper's comments. I'm slightly concerned that you aren't reading Dapper's comments yourselves.
Can I answer
but
that?
Yes.
Because it's
Sure.
directed at me. I read the whole report. My question was, could they point out for the public what on these drawings, how exactly were they going to answer Dapper's comments? I read Dapper's comments. I knew
I had understood that you were
every one of
asking
the
them.
comments, but I didn't
Great.
know how they're going to be implemented.
Great, thank you. Glad to hear that. Okay. My next question is, could you please, could the developer please, what percentage are the AMIs? Like, what percent are at 30? What percent are, I don't, unless I missed that, I wasn't clear on how the AMI breakdown is for the affordable housing?
So 100% of these units will be restricted at 60% of AMI, and within that, 50% of the units will be covered by a contract with the Cook County Housing Authority. So those units will be restricted at 50% of area median. We also have within the other 30% that are not on the County Housing Authority contract, we have 6 of the remaining 30 units are restricted at 30% of area median.
And the other 24?
The other 24 are at 60%.
So 6 at 30, 24 at 60, and 30 at 50. Okay.
And lastly, I would just urge, given the location of this, the Howard Street, that you protect this neighborhood and every possible amenity that is in our zoning code to keep this neighborhood as lovely as possible and not to bend over for a developer that's for profit and can certainly make amends to keep this neighborhood, to keep setbacks and any green space and any particulars that will add to this Howard Street neighborhood. I ask that you respect our zoning in those regards for the sake of the neighbors in this particular part of our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to ask questions of the developer?
Could I just, as a procedural matter here, this is our attorney, and he wants to clarify something on the continuance issue.
Yeah, my name is Steve Friedland with Applegate and Thorne Thompson. So I'm not sure how we, first of all, have a continuance after we've basically gotten into the hearing of the whole matter. So as I read the code, there's a specific reason why somebody can request a continuance, and it says for the purpose of presenting evidence to rebut testimony of the applicant, not to inform your neighbors that there's a hearing which has been published and people knew about, and materials that have been on the city's website. So, this is an expensive project. We have people here tonight. Obviously, people from the community have shown up. I'm just not familiar with the notion that someone simply gets to stand up and write on a piece of paper that we should move this to another date for the purpose of informing her neighbors. So, and then on top of that, to then take what is testimony from someone asking questions of us with respect to things. This is a public hearing, so I think it should be handled as a public hearing, and people have the right to be here. Certainly, the neighbor can get up and speak to what her concerns are. I think she already did to a certain extent, to say that she understood there was going to be more parking, but I'm just not sure why you would be granting a continuance under the code simply because somebody in the audience is asking for another few weeks or whatever it might be.
So my understanding of the request, or of the impending request from the member of the public, is that there was testimony by the applicant that was made today, and that she intended to inform her neighbors because she believed those neighbors would be able to come in and help her rebut testimony with respect to the amount of parking that was going to be provided in the project. Based on that, if that request is made, I believe it will be granted.
I find that to be a very favorable view of what was said, what I heard the individual request. And I'm not even sure why that's evidence. This is a public, you have standards, and I don't know, to be very honest with you, if David or anyone else from the project would have stated 3 months ago that there were going to be 183 parking spaces at this location, and now we're requesting a site development allowance to have 55 parking spaces, why that would be a relevant piece of evidence for you. It doesn't go to any of the standards of the special use or the plan or the plan development. A piece of relevant information might be a traffic study, something like that. I understand.
I understand your position, and I understand that you're advocating for your client. Thank you. You've been heard.
I appreciate that. Again, I just don't, and I would expect that when we come back, if that's what this, it sounds like somebody's writing on their piece of paper, that there will be relevant evidence so that all of the time and effort that our team has put to come here tonight will be made worthwhile, that it won't just be a bunch of people who stand up and say, I thought he said there were going to be more parking spaces.
That will be our expectation.
So my name is Shannon Hackett. I live in the neighborhood, and I have a couple of questions to ask. I think this went off kilter a little bit when the idea that this would be moving without any public comment from us to needing to have some kind of a official piece of paper to extend a discussion. We've had really good community meetings. I've been at several of them. And so I'm kind of a little bit upset that, it was a procedural thing that prevented us from having a further dialogue with this. I check my mail every day. I did not know there were going to be variances associated with this property. And so I couldn't have made any kind of appeal to you or to our alderperson or to this committee before today, when I learned about the fact that there were variances requested. So what is the procedure for that?
Right now is the time for questions to the developer, to the applicant. If you have questions to the applicant, now is the time to ask them.
So I have a couple of things. You have a break in the back on the north side of the property, on the alley. You actually have kind of an opening. Is that meant to be a permanent opening on the back? Do you know what I mean? Go and show me the back of the alley view of the building. So, yeah, there. So is that a permanent opening?
So that is
David, Mr. Black,
Sorry.
So that's actually an emergency exit from the back of the CJE building is what you're seeing there. And there's an emergency exit. You see the stairway heading up.
Right.
There's an emergency exit from the deck as well. So it's emergency, but both the gate at the top there and the back door are locked at all times. So really what's back there is behind the fence is the location for the dumpsters.
So those stairs that we're looking at right there, there's going to be a gate preventing people from walking from the alley up those stairs and hiding.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, yes, we will address.
We've had murders back there and all kinds of things that have made them, that we would worry about the safety of kind of everyone. If people could run back in there, it would cause problems for the police, for the people who live and work at this space, and for the neighbors behind it.
Yeah, so again, for security issues for the residents, for the CJE clients, we'd probably have to have a crash bar door at the top and at the bottom, because it really is an exit only. And so yes, we can fill in that gap with a real gate.
Okay, that makes me feel slightly more comfortable. And the parking is an issue in this neighborhood. In the last few years, we've gone to a lot of there's been a lot of community development to help us handle the parking situation and to make it safer, both to get into that neighborhood, and the parking changes were critical for making it safer, especially in the wintertime, to come into the neighborhood behind, on the side, on the west side of that building. And so anything that puts more cars parking in that neighborhood is something that is really concerning for those of us who live in there, because we have seen and continue to see some parking issues in that neighborhood. I wouldn't want to try to drive a emergency vehicle down Brummel, for example, to try to get into that neighborhood if there were a fire or emergency vehicle. And so anything that puts more cars in the neighborhood of people who don't live there is, and we know that from the discussions we had when you were in the neighborhood, that was a really significant issue for all of the neighbors. The parking issues are substantially important to us.
Could you state your name and?
Yeah, my name is Shannon Hackett, and I live on Dobson Street, just behind a bit west and behind the building.
And so I would ask that if you have a question, because now's the time for question, not for comment. So if you have another question.
Why did you, the parking, I was under the impression that the formula that was in there was something you were going to be using to come up with the parking spots, and I felt pretty comfortable with that in our community meetings, but it's changed since then. Why is it different?
As I tried to explain, we tried to put as many parking spaces in this parking structure as possible. And this view shows you, and I think the front views show you, part of the idea behind this design was essentially to avoid creating any needless connection between the Howard Street side and the alley back here. So we still have the trash pickup going down here. That exists today, that's not changing. But we are not opening a fence onto Howard Street, and we're not creating, if anything, we are creating a bit more of a barrier between the traffic and parking situation on Howard Street and the neighborhood behind. Why did we design this building the way we did? Because vans take up a certain amount of space and cars take up a certain amount of space, and you have to have the turning radius to accommodate all these things. So we fit in as many as we possibly could, and that is what we're coming here to show you, is we really can't put any more in and still make the program work.
And then I have, this may be a trivial question about how people who live in there are going to handle their garbage. Are there garbage chutes inside of the buildings? Because they don't have to take all their garbage all the way over across the building to the dumpster areas, do they?
Correct. There's a trash chute in the building, so it'll be our maintenance person's responsibility to collect the trash that comes down the chute and put it in the dumpster and move it out to the alley every 2 or 3 days.
And if you're going to put white cement up there, whose responsibility is it to maintain the inevitable dirt that's going to collect on white? Because the building is starkly white. Well, a significant percentage of it is starkly white. So it is going to look a little disconsonant, I think, with the building. With the neighborhood. So whose responsibility is it to maintain that? When the plants die, whose responsibility is it to maintain all of those plants?
So it's, we are long-term owner managers, so it is our responsibility, Evergreen's responsibility, to maintain this property over time. There is a minimum 15-year hold on an affordable housing property, so and there is an additional 15 years that the state agency puts on top of it. So we are in this property for the long haul. And as I said, I've lived in Evanston for 13 years. I'm personally an owner in this property, and so I feel personally pretty invested. I'm a 5-minute walk away from this site. This is my neighborhood too. So, I'm not interested in creating challenges here. I'm trying to, A, provide much needed affordable housing for seniors, B, help out my partners at CJE who are doing a fabulous job, and C, really help with the revitalization of Howard Street.
I totally appreciate those values, and I think most of the neighbors share them. It's just, for me, it was shocking to see you wanting to build to the edge of the, of the property. And that to me was shocking, and what makes me not understand kind of how that happened and why we weren't so informed as I thought we would be if there were variances requested.
I think if I could treat that as a question for a second, if you could go back to the 3D cutaway of the site, I think part of the challenge here is that in some of those early conversations, we had plans, but we hadn't necessarily developed this diagram. And if you just look at the floor plans, you don't necessarily understand how this building works. It's a fairly complicated three-dimensional puzzle to put this building onto that site. And we thought it was a much better alternative to build the back of the parking deck up to the edge of the property line and block headlights and anybody's view into the parking deck rather than have that be an open edge to a parking garage. I think that's the right decision here. And so those diagrams, they have been part of our presentation, not from the very beginning, but certainly we've been talking about the need for parking here since the very earliest community meetings here.
Okay. Let's see, if I may. Claire Kelly? That was you. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so you asked your questions. Lois.
I have some questions.
Okay, if you're going to ask, I'm sorry?
I'm not going to do the continuance thing.
Then you may come up and ask questions.
And then I have comments later.
Comments for later, yes.
I just have a few comments or questions. So the loading dock is accessed in Howard Street, not on the alley? Okay. The deck, that is on the north side of the structure. Okay. And are there, how high are the walls around the deck? You may have said that. I missed it.
So on the back side, on the south side, the wall is going to be at least 6 feet of opaque structure, and then possibly to make sure we have a safe environment for people who might be getaways, we may actually have a rail or something that's a little bit higher than that, even to prevent people from going. On the north side, correct, on the alley side. We are very mindful that, yes, this is on the north side of the building, and we don't want the shadow from the building to block whatever sunlight the deck can have. This was the best location on the site for the deck. The alternative was to put it on the roof itself, which makes it very challenging in terms of CJE access. At this location, access for CJE is pretty straightforward, and access from the residential side is pretty straightforward. So what we have to figure out is what the deck enclosure is, particularly on the west and east side, so that we admit as much sunlight into that deck as possible for the benefit of the residents who are using it.
And just one more question. So there's a connection between CJE and the new structure, and that's just to access the deck. Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you. And then the final person that signed up for speaking on this matter is a Matt Rogers. Okay, thank you. All right, is there anyone else who hasn't signed in that would like to ask questions of the developer? Okay. With that, I actually have a few follow-up questions at this time. If we can go to the slide that shows the first floor plan, the site plan for the first floor. That one, yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of space in between the parking areas for the CJE buses. Okay, and I'm wondering, are you anticipating that the buses will be loading and unloading people in those spots, or are they going to pull in, unload people, and then go and park? Because it seems to me that you could fit in, 4, maybe 6 more parking spaces if all that area in between the parking spaces wasn't there.
Good question. So actually what you're seeing there in the little hatched areas, they're columns that are supporting the third and fourth floor of the building there. And so
Well, I see columns in the middle, right? Like
Right.
basically like running straight through the middle of that area.
Yep.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so the spaces are kind of lined up on the columns in this diagonal grid, so we had to do it that way. But no, the intention is not to load and unload in the deck. The intention was for the buses, they will drive in, circulate up, circulate down, because their doors, when they're circulating this way, their doors are at the entrance here. Drop off the clients here, and then either circulate back up and park or go back out for another trip. So all of the loading and unloading will happen at the front door of CJE.
Okay. Thank you. All right. With that, we will move to public comment, public testimony and comment. And we will go in order of the sign-up sheet. That would be Claire Kelly would go first. No comments? Okay. Lois, is it Hedman? Lois Hedman.
Thank you. So, yeah, I just wanted to make a few comments that are, similar to some of what Shannon said. The parking is a concern. And while there's studies, but Evanston is congested, and so is Chicago, and the promises that, the people that move in won't have cars, I don't know. The people will have visitors. There's a lot of staff that have to park. There's the vans. So to lowball that is a concern, and it's a concern for our neighborhood, as Shannon talked about. The fit to the neighborhood, I just also want to address. The point was made that Howard Street right now doesn't look so great, and I would 100% agree with you, 100%. But that's not a reason to put up something that doesn't really, just because it's better than what's there, that's not the bar that should be used. It's a historic neighborhood. Do you know that? That whole area there is a historic neighborhood. And to have, it's the current CJE building is kind of nondescript, and it's not really that attractive, but it's kind of, you don't notice it. But when I saw the renderings, and this white and orange building was just shocking to see. And, is that what we want for the entrance to Evanston? I really thought from the meetings that we had before that, and I think what I said was I wanted the building on the outside to look as good as what was happening inside, because as Shannon said, our neighbor, we value the work that CJE has done there. I have taken students there. It's a wonderful facility. We also, many of us are supportive of having affordable housing. But that doesn't mean that, we want something that is put up, and just, it was supposed to fit into the neighborhood. That was also mentioned at the meetings that we had before. And this white and orange building does not fit at all. So it's really taking, it's an improvement over what's there, because most of it's, it's a parking lot and the Dairy Queen. But again, the bar shouldn't be just make it a little bit better than what it is. Let's set our sights higher than that, all right? And again, so that it really befits the work that is done inside of CJE, which is really a wonderful thing. So I just really want you to take that seriously into consideration. The expansion right to the alley is a concern. I do appreciate that, as well as the added height. These are our properties back up to this. And so it adds, that much more of just a concrete barrier to that we're looking at instead of looking at sky. And that's important. It's important to the people that live there. And I know you mentioned that you've done everything you can to fit things in here, but we live here. This is where we live, and I've lived there for 25 years. Many people are longstanding. So I really want you to think about what you are allowing when you are just granting these allowances. So that's a concern. I think that pretty much covers my concerns, and I just really hope that you will take Shannon's and my comments, as well as, and I don't know your name, seriously. The bar needs to be higher. It needs to be higher than just improving what's there. We all know that it's a problem with what's there. But there's been a lot of improvements on Howard Street, and Howard Street but to put up this white and orange, it's just shocking to look at. And it does not fit into the neighborhood. It's a historic neighborhood. So if you haven't been down there to see the neighborhood, you should go. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Rogers.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mr. Chairman. My name is Matt Rogers. I live just outside the 1,000 feet. I'm probably about 1,500 feet, a little further down Howard Street towards the Metro tracks. This is an area, this particular project, I very much am in support of. Evanston has been complaining about affordable housing for a long time and trying to figure out how it fits into our plans. Here we have a project that is 100% affordable housing. It's something that the city should be welcoming. I do understand many of the concerns of the neighbors, but I will just also say that this is, to be quite honest, this is a commercial corridor. Howard Street is a commercial street. We're putting residential on a commercial area. That's where a larger residential structure should be placed. If you go down and look at what exists along that particular stretch of Howard, you're going to find a couple of strip malls, a McDonald's, an old decrepit Dairy Queen that hasn't been a Dairy Queen for 15 years, a medical building, which is a concrete structure with very little detail to it whatsoever. I think bringing in a building and trying to make it affordable, when you build 100% affordable, you can't have extravagant budgets. You can't deck the entire or clad the entire building in marble or in wood facade or something like that. It's very difficult to do. So I think they're doing a fine job of making the building attractive while staying within their budgets to provide affordable housing for people. In order to find some place in Evanston where somebody would be able to actually rent something for $300 a month and have their own one-bedroom apartment is great. It's something we should be striving for. So I very much am in support of this project. I do understand many of the parking concerns. My neighborhood has just as many parking problems, probably less, or probably more, because we have fewer garages in my neighborhood. My particular neighborhood is multi-use buildings for the most part. So I do empathize with the neighbors in terms of parking on the street, that sort of stuff. But I do think that this is a great project. I think it should move forward with a positive recommendation to City Council. And thank you for hearing the case, and thank you for your service. Thanks.
Okay, Shannon Hackett.
I cheated before and had comments in my questions, so I'm good.
Thank you for your honesty.
I've never done this before, so I don't know how it works.
Is there anyone else, member of the public, that would like to make comments? Please come up and state your name and your address, please.
So, good evening. My name is Sue Lolbach, and I actually live in Chicago, but I work at Connections for the Homeless here in Evanston at 1458 Chicago Avenue. I also lead a coalition called Joining Forces for Affordable Housing, and we have been watching this evergreen development, and I would like to say we are very excited that Evergreen is working on this. We feel that they're one of the developers who do affordable housing in a really remarkable way, with excellent design, thoughtful density, reasonable use of variances, and that their developments really bring growth and economic development and modern development to neighborhoods that really need it. We know that parking is an issue. Parking is going to be an issue with every single affordable development, and we really hope that it does not become the primary piece of discussion for every affordable development, but rather that Evanston can figure out a way to address it at a broader level so that we don't need to keep going through this. We don't want this being done building by building. Basically, I want to say joining forces really, really supports this building, and if there were any way to make a case for it to be even taller with more affordable units, we would support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, so, excuse me. If there's conversation, it can be taken outside. Thank you. Public comment is now closed. Per our rules, we have the right to cross-examine members of the public, and I actually have a few questions for Ms. Lois Hedman. Please. It shows that you live basically like less than a block away from the project.
Yep.
And presumably, if this project is approved and is built, the parking spillover, if there is parking spillover, would occur most likely right on your block.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. And so on your block, do most of the houses have garages in the back? Do they have, like, there's alley access, obviously, at least on the southern side. To your knowledge, on the northern side, is there an alley on that block as well? I suppose I could look it up on Google Maps.
There is an alley. I don't know about how many of those have garages, though.
Okay. And then on your block, are they mainly single-family homes? Are they 2 flats, 3 flats? What is the what is the predominant building type?
Single-family homes.
Single-family homes. Okay. And so, as far as parking, are there parking problems during the day? Are there parking problems at night? When is the heavy parking usage? Obviously, at near Northwestern, right? Parking is really hard there during the day because the students come in and other staff and other people come in and want to park on the street. But at night, it becomes less of an issue. Is it that way in your neighborhood, or is it the other way around?
Well, I would say it's probably a little bit more the other way around. But often people will they'll come from Chicago to park. They'll come from other neighborhoods that are even denser than ours and park. And sometimes they'll just leave their car there for a period of time. So that goes, day and night. So it's definitely been a long-standing issue for us.
And so your area is not governed by a parking sticker restriction?
We instituted that, or we asked for that, I don't know, about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago.
Okay, and so in order to park on your block, you need to have a sticker for that area?
For overnight parking.
Okay, for overnight.
Yeah.
Okay, and overnight is the area where, or is the time of, let's say, after 5 p.m. and before 7 a.m. That's when parking's the hardest to obtain?
Right.
Okay. And the parking restrictions it's overnight. So what are the restrictions? If I wanted to come and park on your block, what?
Is it like after 6, till,
I'm sorry, I'm going to be asking
yeah.
her.
So if somebody wants to park after 6 p.m., they have to have a sticker in their car. And so you have to provide that to any guests that come.
Okay, so people from other areas in Evanston or people from Chicago can't park on your block overnight?
Not legally, no.
Not legally, okay. But you believe they're still doing it?
I think that when we instituted that, things helped. It brought down some of the congestion. But I don't monitor it.
Sure.
Because I have a driveway.
Okay. And during the day, to your knowledge, it isn't as big of an issue for...
I work, so I don't really know.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. If the petitioner has any responses they want to make to any of the questions or comments that have been made, or make a closing statement, now would be the time.
I don't know that I have a closing statement. I appreciate the respectful conversation that we've had here. Sometimes affordable housing can be a hot button issue for people regardless of the physical form of that development, and it seems like that is not the case here, which as a resident of Evanston, I guess I greatly appreciate. We're excited about this project. We're committed to it. Respectfully, I guess I disagree with some of the statements about the building. I'm an architect and an urban planner. I happen to think it's a very handsome building, but we all know that architecture is a very subjective art. So, if you've seen our buildings, and we showed some pictures at the front, we are big believers in modern architecture, and that's what we're doing here. So, we think this building, as it's designed, will be a good neighbor and will be a good addition to the neighborhood. And again, I am available at any time to talk to the community, but we've laid out the sort of physical constraints of our project, and we've tried to address those constraints, I think, as best we can with this. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right. Does staff want to make a closing statement?
No, we do not have any additional information at this time. Thanks.
Okay. So, commissioners, do you have any questions of the applicant or of staff? Let me see. I actually have a question for staff. One of the allowances, I believe, is to reduce the required rear yard setback for parking to 0 feet where 15 feet is required. Okay, and I'm looking at the site plan, and it shows that there is a drive for the first 12 feet. And then the parking starts, after that 12 feet. So are we really asking for, is the applicant really asking for for relief from 15 feet to 0, or are they asking for 15 feet to 12 based on the, application of the rules?
Yeah, I think we'd consider that drive out would be part of the parking area.
Okay. Okay. All right, commission discussion and deliberation. Commissioners?
I'll go. A lot of issues. God, where do I start? As far as the architecture, I believe that Evanston should be building quality buildings. And just because a building is excuse me, traditional, so-called traditional or brick or whatever people think is traditional doesn't mean it's a good building. And I happen to think this is a good building. It's not white and orange. It's white with wood accents. That's a huge difference. And I think I think when you really look at those materials and the way they're presented, I think it's going to be a very handsome building. That's an easy one. I think the variance on the height, 6 feet, if I have it down correctly, is really not significant. I don't think that that's a big issue. The setback in the rear and the parking are more significant, and I think that's where I've spent most of my time here thinking about. Architecture, buildings, projects are full of compromises. Design is full of compromises, and what we have here is a really great project for the community. The 100% affordable is significant, and as the gentleman spoke about, and so I think what we should do here is weigh all of those factors, and when we consider whether this is a project we should approve. On parking, I know there's the trend is to provide less parking. There are plenty of garages that have empty parking spaces, and certainly I think if you talk to anyone that's in planning in Evanston, they would advocate for less parking. The fact that the neighborhood has the overnight parking rule has to be taken into consideration too. Bottom line for me though is that I don't have enough experience to determine whether what David said about parking and staff parking and how many residents, affordable housing residents, have cars. I can't personally prove that one way or the other, but I know that Evergreen has a lot of experience in this area. I think that affordable is very different than market rate, and I just don't have anything really factual to counter that opinion that this parking is going to be adequate. But I have to say that I am concerned about that. That is my biggest concern, the number of parking spaces. Everything else is not a concern to me. The setback, I think that I'm assuming too that the wall that is, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I'm assuming that the wall that protects the headlights on the higher levels is also on the lower level. Is that? Yes, of course it is. So, I think they've taken steps to mitigate the fact that they are right on the property line. So I guess that's all the thoughts that I had.
All right. I just want to echo George's statement. This is a really good project. It's a very difficult site. It's very tight. There's still some challenges left to encounter along the alley with the utilities, as you pointed out. But if this is the type of project this city needs to embrace and support. There are compromises on the setback, but it's a matter of math. They have to fit the unit and the basic elements of a building to make it work. They have to make it fit on the site, and they have to make the numbers work. So it's not that they're being insensitive to it. They're trying to make this project work in this location, and that from my perspective, it's I firmly believe that. I've lived in Evanston for 54 years. I've walked down Howard Street as much as the average Evanstonian. The Howard Street needs this. It's It needs it desperately, and I think it's I'm glad to see this project to come forward, and I hope you're successful in breaking ground. Thanks.
Looking at this project, I'd say the main concern is for me to look at it going lot line to lot line, and it is really, really right up against the alley with single family right next to it. But looking at the context of where this is on Howard Street, I think it does make a lot more sense here than it could in a lot of other places. You look at the surrounding properties, it is really commercial. It's urban feeling. You're not residential on that strip. So I think that gives it a little bit more leeway to allow this going lot line to lot line. I'm glad that I see the amenity deck space. When I first looked at the project, I was a little concerned that there wasn't any space for the seniors, since that's always huge. That's very important to seniors. So I'm glad that you incorporated amenity deck space. My only comment on the green wall is that I'm a little bit hesitant about you showing it going up to the 4th floor. I think that's quite ambitious, and it'll take a long time for that to happen, and it probably won't live. So it might be a good idea to think about a different material past the 1st floor, just from experience. And whatever you plant there is only going to be green for 4 months. But parking-wise, as Commissioner Halleck stated, it's hard for us we have to kind of take in your recommendation that seniors don't have cars, but affordable housing, all of those things, we can't really prove that either way. It is quite a big reduction variance. We're not talking 5, we're talking, over 10. So that does make me quite hesitant. But overall, I agree that this is a good project for the area.
So I have a few comments, and number one, I want to echo my fellow commissioners' statements that this is a project that I think is on a whole easy to support. I would point out on the setback issue that if it wasn't parking on the north side, if it was just retail or office, that you could go to the lot line and they wouldn't have to ask for any variance or any kind of relief. It's just that it's parking. So the fact that it's enclosed and not visible to the street, visible to the alley, and plus there's no access from the alley, I don't really see that setback request as an issue, because it could have been office, it could have been retail, and they wouldn't be here asking for anything. So ultimately, I think that's an easy one to get over get past that hurdle. The parking is an issue, and the reason why I think the parking is an issue is that there's 33 spaces that are required for the existing, effectively for the existing CJE activities on site, and then you need 36 more spaces for the residential. And what seems to me that's going to be happening is that that CJE is going to get 100% of the parking that it's required to have, and it's going to be taking from the residential, as opposed to cutting it down, let's say 50-50 or pro rata or whatever. And so that's the I guess issue for me, that we're allowing for 60 units, and by code they're allowed to only produce 36 spaces, but they're only going to be providing 22. Now, we received testimony that the issue with parking for the neighborhood was at night. And we also received testimony from the applicants that their staff, the 22 spaces for their staff, are going to be used during the day because their activities go from, I believe it was like 8:30 to 5 or 8 to 5. And so it seems to me that if we have a problem with, if we as a commission have a problem with the amount of parking, that we can say you need to set aside a certain number of spaces for the residential, knowing that some employees that are there during the day will travel there using public transportation, they won't have cars, that to the extent they need to park on the street, they'll be parking on the street and they'll be gone before their presence on the streets of either Chicago or Evanston affect the residents in the area, because the parking restrictions that are in place on those, in those areas have not taken effect yet by the time those employees either get there or they leave. Those are my comments. I think that we can build, build something into the recommendation that sets aside a certain number of parking spaces for the residential, if that's a concern, and that way we can address those concerns and move forward.
I just don't know how we come up with that number. I don't know enough to say that.
Well, if we have questions for either the applicant or staff, we are well within our right to ask those questions now.
I could just point out a piece of information. The applicant would obviously know how much they utilize their spaces now, but it looks like there's 26 spaces currently on the site, on CJE's site.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, we're setting aside 33 for CJE and 22 for the residential. So if CJE is only using 26, right there, currently, we can say that of that 26, after 26, 29 go to the residential, and that's only a reduction of 7 from what's required under the ordinance. And I'm going to ask Mr. Block what he thinks about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that Evergreen does that many affordable housing developers don't do is we like doing mixed-use development. We think it's the right thing for cities, and we think it leads to a richer experience for the residents that we are, it's sort of our fundamental mission to serve. And so this is a mixed-use development. And the conversations that we have had with our partner is that the upper deck of the parking structure is really set aside and designed for their vans plus the visitors. But Mr. Isaac, you correctly point out that really will be used for visitors only during the day. The vans stay there at night. I mean, if you drive by that site at night, the big Shalom buses are there. So the vans will be there at night. But that is only 11 spaces of that upper deck. And so I think that we can commit, if there is a parking issue, and again, I'm not quite sure how you would write this into your recommendation to council, but we are committed to working with our partners. If there is a problem, we can solve it internally on the site. Maybe the way to do that is, the thought was that the upper deck is essentially closed off at night and is only for CJE access. But if it becomes a problem, we can give our building residents who have a car a key card that is only activated after CJE is closed and give them access to the upper parking deck so that we can handle the spillover parking internally. So we're shifting time within the parking deck, which is one of the real virtues of mixed-use development.
Now, this might be a question for, I'm sorry, I forget your name from CJ.
For Laura.
Laura. Currently, you're 22 staff members. How many of them are parking in your parking lot during the day?
So currently, we have 19 people that are driving to work and 3 that are using public transportation. They come up on the L at Howard and then take the bus. The way that lot is currently configured, what does happen during the daytime is when the drivers arrive, they pull their buses out, and there's enough room for them to pull their cars into those spaces. I don't know if this parking deck would allow that to occur.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it can. It's a little trickier, but it can.
Yeah.
So they can move their vans out of the spot, or currently what they do, your drivers. So you have 11 drivers?
9.
9 drivers. 9 drivers for 11 vans.
Mhm.
Okay.
Or
And
8,
so.
I'm sorry, 8 drivers.
8 drivers for
Yeah.
11 vans. And so 8 of the 19 people that currently work there, or currently drive, use the van spaces when they park. Okay. What about the other 11?
So they're using the other spaces, and as David described, probably 98% of our clients come there via our Shalom buses. They are, we provide door-to-door transportation as required by the Illinois Department on Aging, which is our regulatory agency that oversees the program.
Mm-hmm.
But we certainly have families that bring clients on their own, or they have a doctor's appointment and they come late, et cetera. And we have visitors. We have students that come to the agency and participate in the programs. We have entertainers that come to provide services to the clients during the daytime. So we use the other parking spaces to meet those needs.
So, and there's 26 spaces currently, including the vans?
Yes.
Okay, so 11 for vans or the employees that use the vans,
Mhm.
and then
15.
another 11 for the the other employees that drive. So that's 22 spaces either have vans or employees that drive. And so you currently have 4 spaces for visitors. Okay. And it's right now, the way I'm looking at this, the site plan, it looks like there's, for the most part, all the vans and buses are in that main upper area, and there's 7 visitor parking spaces. Are those going to remain visitor spaces, and then you're going to put employees? The other 11 employees, they will park in the lower?
That was the intention, yes.
Okay. So the parking situation is even, even more dire than was, what was, I guess, originally being discussed, right? So.
Peter, if I
please.
may, I disagree. I don't think they have a parking problem. I think the way the zoning code is written for housing doesn't take into account for this type of use. I don't think they're going to have trouble for their residents of those who may even have cars finding a spot for them. I really don't think parking is an issue. That's my opinion based on my understanding of this market. So I think technically on the books, they're required to provide that parking. I think the reality, the functionality of how they're actually going to use this facility and their need, I don't think they're going to have an issue. So they're kind of caught because that's the way the zoning is written.
So I absolutely appreciate your opinion on that. All I'm trying to do is understand what the
what the net effect is going to be, right? So what I'm trying to understand is how many spaces are actually going to be available for residential. I'm not making a value judgment, okay, at this time, but what we're trying to figure out is where is everyone going to be parking, okay? And so we've established that the bus drivers the bus and van drivers are going to park in the spots where the buses and vans go. That's great, okay? That alleviates any potential parking shortage, okay? If the balance of the spaces on that top floor are for visitors, that's an increase in visitor parking than what's currently on site. And so, yes, that's wonderful as well, okay? But right now, we've taken 11 spaces for vans, 7 spaces for visitors. We've been told that there's another 11 employees that are going to have parking spaces as well. Okay, so that gets us to 29 out of the 55 spaces, right? So there's.
Where in the code, where in the zoning ordinance is the requirement for visitor spaces?
There's no. There's nothing in there, but.
So that is a value judgment. We're inserting that into this discussion.
Can you turn on your?
There's nothing defined in the zoning ordinance for visitor parking.
No, but there is for residences, right? And so
yes, but we're by inserting the visitor parking need, we're putting a value opinion on this discussion.
This is what they're saying. How they're saying they're going to use their parking. Okay, while the code splits it up and says, okay, the CJE activities require 33 spaces and the residential require 36 spaces, okay? And they're providing 55. Nowhere in the recommendations or in the application has there been any discussion by the applicant on how they're actually going to use those spaces. By zoning, they're required to provide them based on one use and the second use, okay?
Right.
But it seems to me that they're going to be using more than the 33 spaces that are required for the CJE activities. They're going to be using more spaces than that. So when we're saying, okay, we're shorting the residential, basically, the 14 spaces. They might be shorting this residential more than the 14 spaces that are required by code. And once we figure out what that number is, okay, then we can make a value determination on whether the type of use and the affordable nature of the project deems it worthy to say, you know what the applicant has said is ultimately acceptable, and we should move forward. We're just eliciting information at this point.
Okay.
Please.
I've got a question on handicap accessible parking. I don't see any identified on your plan. I know van can double as handicap parking, but if we're doing that, if you already have your set number of vans, do you have handicap accessible parking in addition? They're not currently identified. Are they? Oh, they're at that corner? Okay. So you've got 2 spots.
The 2 spots labeled as van access? Okay, so it's not anticipated that vans will be parking there. The 11 vans will be on the...
Yeah, you can double them, so that they do fit that, okay. So currently, though, you have, okay. Yeah, currently you've got 2 ADA accessible spots just for CJE, so you wouldn't be having any additional for the residential.
There's 1 accessible spot on the upper deck as well.
Okay.
accessible parking spot.
Okay.
So, if I may, Steve Corcoran is here from Erickson Engineering, who's a civil and transportation engineering firm, and they were the ones who prepared the traffic study, parking study for us. Steve has pointed out, in looking at the census data for Evanston, that of the total population of Evanston, 65 and older, so this is the population that we're looking to serve, which according to the American Community Survey from 2017, it was 1,814 households. Almost 44% of those households do not have a car. And I suspect if you were to further correlate age with income, the percentage of low-income seniors, 65 and older, who do not have a car is quite a bit higher than that. And so Tom Lockwood, who is the CFO of CJE, pointed out to me that they still operate a number of senior housing facilities. They have one in Skokie that is about the same distance from the end of the yellow line as this facility is from our end of the yellow line. And they have 150 parking spaces. They have 150 residents in their building, and they only have 45 parking spaces. So again, it's that 0.3-ish ratio. And during the day, when you're at that property, because these are active seniors, as we suspect our population will be, that parking lot is virtually empty because the seniors go out during the day and they do their errands during the day. So again, I think you're searching for data and information. We're trying to kind of augment that to what was already in our traffic and parking study.
How many spaces are going to be set aside for the residences?
The intention was that the lower parking deck was for residents of the building plus CJE staff. But I guess the point that I was trying to make earlier is because we are partners in this venture, that we don't have a need. It's not like it's a condominium structure where we own some and CJE owns some. We're joint venturing on this. We have the flexibility to shift around, and so if we don't really need 7 visitor parking spaces on the top deck, but we need more employee parking, the employees can park up on the top deck. And so the overall design of the parking configuration gives us that flexibility. Access control issues are something we're going to have to figure out, but we've got a clever design team who can work with us on that.
Are you going to be charging residents for parking?
No charge for any of this parking, but it will be gate controlled because this is not a public parking facility. This is a private facility.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments or deliberation? All right, let's go to the standards. Okay, special use standards under 6-3-5-10. Number 1, it is one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinance. Not sure that that's we're not really asking for a special use here. What's is it because the plan development is a special use?
Correct. The plan development is a special use.
So that is satisfied. It is in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan and zoning ordinance as amended from time to time. Well, we're looking at a affordable housing development. We're looking at a piece of property that has for the most part sat, at least a portion of it has sat vacant for the better part of 15 years. Unless I hear any objection from the commissioners, I would say that this
I just think the statement isn't written to allow variances. It's written as a yes or no. Does it comply with the zoning ordinance or does it not? And it doesn't. So
I'm sorry. It is in keeping with the policies of the
comprehensive
adopted
general plan. I mean, the way I read it, it doesn't allow variances. Unless you inserted the word generally in keeping or something like that, but.
Okay. Understood. All right, number 3, it will not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various special uses, so various planned developments of all types on the immediate neighborhood and the effect of the proposed type of planned development upon the city as a whole. So what we're weighing is the the pros and the cons of this development on the immediate neighborhood and upon the city as a whole. And for me, I would say that it's satisfied, but I would, Commissioner Halleck?
Yeah, I would, my opinion would be that it's a cumulative thing. You're weighing pluses and minuses, and I personally feel that the pluses overwhelm the minuses. So,
Okay.
yes, I would.
All right, it does not interfere with or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood. Okay, well, we heard testimony that it could potentially interfere with the property, whether it would interfere with or diminish the value of the property. That is not something that that is not testimony that we received. It can be adequately served by public facilities and services. That's satisfied. Does not cause undue traffic congestion. I believe we had testimony that number one, they underwent a traffic study, and they're avoiding using the alley to cause issues to the residents in the back, and we're removing one of the 3 curb cuts. So I believe that's satisfied. It preserves significant historical or architectural resources. That is not applicable unless you consider the old Dairy Queen historical resource. Preserve significant natural and environmental features. Both of these, the sites that are going to be built on are already fully paved. Complies with all other applicable regulations in the district. It's located in other applicable ordinances except to the extent such regulations have been modified through the plan development process. That, I mean, as far as I can tell, that's always satisfied. Okay, moving on. Standards for plan developments. As a special use, plan development involves such special considerations of the public interest that it should be required to adhere to the specific plan development standards established in the zoning district in which it is located. Compliance with the standards shall govern the recommendations of the Plan Commission applicable to a plan development and the action of the City Council in order to ensure that an approved plan development is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance. The Plan Commission shall not recommend approval of, nor shall the City Council approve, a plan development unless each shall determine, based on written findings of fact, that the plan development satisfies the specific standards established in the zoning district in which the plan development is located. Okay, so that's what we're doing right now. I'm not sure that there's anything else to say there. Standard and guidelines for plan developments in the B2 district. Number 1, each plan development shall be compatible with surrounding development and shall not be of such a nature in height, bulk, or scale as to exercise any influence contrary to the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance as set forth in section 6-1-2, purpose and intent of this title. Okay, so as far as height, they're asking for 6 feet. As far as bulk, this is well below the bulk. It is at least my opinion that this item is satisfied. Any comments from commissioners? Okay. Number 2, each plan development shall be compatible with and implement the adopted comprehensive general plan as amended. Any adopted land use or urban design plan specific to that area, this ordinance and any other pertinent city planning and development policies, particularly in terms of A, land use, B, land use intensity, C, housing, D, preservation, E, environmental, F, traffic impact and parking, G, impact on schools, public services and facilities, H, essential character of the business district, the surrounding neighborhoods, and abutting residential lots, I, neighborhood planning, J, business district planning and economic development goals and policies, particularly those of specific adopted plans and individual business districts. K, conservation of the taxable value of land and buildings throughout the city, and retention of taxable land on tax rolls. Okay, well, there's a lot there. As far as adding to the tax rolls, it absolutely will do that. We're adding residential on floors, 2 through 4, which is well within what is supposed to be added into a business district. We're not adding any retail on the first floor, which is unfortunate, but obviously the site constrictions that we've been discussing prevent that. The one issue that we have here is that I think we've explored is the traffic impact and parking, mainly just the parking, but otherwise, on the whole, I would say that this is satisfied. Do any of the commissioners have any comments? Okay, moving on. 3, each plan development shall enhance and maintain the pedestrian character of the business districts. Okay. I don't think there was any testimony that this project was going to reduce the pedestrian character of the business districts. And again, we are removing one of the curb cuts, which is in favor of pedestrians. So I would say that's satisfied. Number 4, each plan development shall enhance the streetscape and architectural character of the business districts, including, where possible, preserving character, giving buildings and existing streetscape amenities. So we received testimony that the existing building is going to be, the facade is going to be upgraded, that the developer is going to be adding trees. And we know that one of the recommendations of staff is that the developer work with the city to select appropriate trees for that portion of the street. So I would again say that that's satisfied. And number 5, each plan development shall be completed within 2 years of the issuance of the special use permit. Okay, well, I'm not going to continue reading that. That's something really prospective, and it will be a requirement of the developer. So that's satisfied. Number 6, no special use permit for plan development shall be valid for a period longer than 1 year unless a building permit is issued. Again, this is prospective. We're not going to go through that. They're going to have to, the developer is going to have to comply with that in order to maintain their plan development approval should they get it. Number 7, all landscaping and streetscape treatment within the plan development shall be provided in accordance with requirements set forth in Chapter 17, landscaping and screening. I believe we received testimony that was in fact going to be provided. So we'll call that satisfied unless there's any objections.
That's it.
And that's it. Okay. So with all that, do I have a motion to approve the plan development application 19 PLND 0012?
Yeah, I move to approve the plan development as presented.
Do I have a second? Okay, Alex seconds. Are there any amendments to the, any proposed amendments to the application?
Just to clarify, that motion is subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
Correct.
Thank you.
Halleck, you maintain your second? Yeah. I have an amendment that I'd like to propose that since one of the items that is the developer selling the project to the community is that it's 100% affordable. I think one of the requirements for the plan development be that the property remain 100% affordable. They're asking for, they're selling it to us as that. They're asking for site variances. That's going to be, if we approve it, that's going to be our recommendation. So that's my, I move to amend the requirements in that way. Mr. Block, would you like to make a statement?
Only that it's going to be subject to a 30-year affordable restriction from IDA and probably a 30-year affordable restriction from the city of Evanston. I'm not sure that restricting it beyond that 30-year horizon is within the purview of this commission, so.
Can you turn on your mic, please?
I honestly, I thought our mission, our charge was not to evaluate the affordability mix of a residential project. I thought we were steering away from that. Am I incorrect?
Can we get some input from Corporation Counsel?
As we've dealt with other, and Sir Brian can weigh in as well, but I'm dealing with other plan developments. The inclusionary housing ordinance is not within the purview of the Plan Commission.
Right.
So
I stand corrected. Thank you. All right, I have no other amendments. Let's take a vote. This will be sent to the City Council, so we'll do it by roll call. Ms. Jones?
Commissioner Draper?
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Picozzi? Chair Isaac?
Yes. All right, the plan development application passes unanimously. It will be sent to the City Council for review and determination. We're going to take a 2-minute recess to let the people that have been here for this item to exit, and then when we return, we will move on to PLND 0103, Plan Development Setbacks in Residential Districts. All right, let's reconvene and move on to 19 PLND 0103, planned development setbacks in residential districts. Who is going to present this one?
That would be me.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
All right. Good evening, commissioners, members of the public. Megan Jones, Neighborhood and Land Use Planner. I will dive right in here. As the commission is fully aware, our zoning ordinance provides regulations for possible planned developments and addresses items specific to the review process, minimum thresholds, and things like site development allowances for each specific project. Now, for Section 6365 of the zoning ordinance, which specifically addresses site development allowances, that essentially grants the ability to grant those site development allowances, and those are usually related to bulk and density, specifically floor area ratio, height, location and placement of buildings, off-street parking and loading, number of dwelling units, building lot coverage, and impervious surface coverage. So each chapter within the zoning ordinance, which is specific to different zoning classifications like residential, commercial, or downtown districts, includes a section that's specifically designated to provide regulations for our planned developments. For residentially zoned areas, that section 68110 planned developments addresses those particular bulk and density items, specifically Section C, for the location and placement of buildings, which is item number 3 under subsection C, that currently states that the location and placement of buildings may vary from that otherwise permitted in the residential districts. However, at no time shall any dwelling be closer than 15 feet from any street or development boundary line. Further, the minimum spacing between any two residential buildings within the planned development shall be 12 feet. Now, similar setback requirements from residential districts or residentially zoned districts exist in some of our other zoning classifications. And they generally vary based on the intensity of the uses that are within that particular zoning district. So required setbacks for a business district would probably be less than required setbacks for an industrial district that would have a heavier manufacturing or something of that nature. So the applicant, who also has a proposed residential development application, specifically a zoning analysis that's in currently, has a planned development that's proposed at 1555 Ridge. This would be affected by the particular regulations and the building location specifics that I mentioned. They are proposing to make that building location and spacing requirement a site development allowance. After receiving the application, staff actually took a look at past projects and found that the interpretation of that 15-foot setback requirement for dwelling units has actually varied over time. I would say up until the earlier 2000s, in some cases, the setback was actually granted, was considered to be exceeding the maximum site development allowance and had to receive a supermajority vote from the city council. And some examples of that would be the Reserve at 1930 Ridge down the street and Church Street Village at 1613 Church Street. In a couple of other planned developments, the relief appears to have been granted from the requirements in the form of a regular site development allowance, or the site development allowance more so followed the underlying zoning regulations and not that particular requirement. So an example of that would be at 1511 Monroe Street and 1228 Emerson Street, which is also down the street. I think that would be the Bend planned development. However, more recently, the community development and law departments have actually determined that those developments have not been eligible to request relief from that minimum setback. So what is proposed tonight would provide some clarity on that issue. So specifically, what is being proposed is to change section 68110C, specifically item number 3, to essentially add in language that for that 15-foot setback requirement for dwellings, we would say that would be required unless it is otherwise approved as a site development allowance by the city council. We would not be making any changes to the spacing between two buildings. Now, taking that into consideration, for planned developments that do come before the commission, we would still be taking into consideration items like the general bulk and density of the building, building height, the proximity of the building to adjacent buildings and structures, and how the site circulation might be affected, as well as general items like the neighborhood context. So, as is the case for all of our text and map amendments, we've got the 4 standards, which we can go over in more detail once we get to deliberation. So with that, I will take questions.
I don't have any questions, but I think one of the significant things about setbacks is the context, and maybe that's one of the things you mentioned, that, you know, how far setback are the other buildings on that block, or, you know, something like that. That's, to me, more important than anything. So anyway, but I don't see any problem with the rewording.
So, wouldn't this situation normally be handled by requesting a map amendment to change the zoning from residential to, let's say, a commercial? I mean, it sounds to me like this is going, like, the situations where this would arise, we're talking about a very large structure, right? And so, the way to get around this would usually be to just ask for a change from residential to another zoning district, and then ask for a planned development allowance, right? And so, so why the change?
You do bring up a good point that a zoning change could be requested. In some cases, that could actually be done if it's adjacent to a zoning district where that change would make sense. In some cases, you may have a residential development that is placed squarely within other residentially zoned areas, and that would end up being spot zoning, which we don't promote. So this is kind of a compromise of those issues or potential options, so that we can still take a look at the context of what's surrounding a particular development, but still provide for some, I guess, buffer, if need be, between other uses within a particular district.
I'm a little confused. So is this, or I need clarification. So is this going to apply for plan unit developments that have residential components in them that are adjacent to our districts?
They're located in our, this is for our district specifically. So if you have a property in an R district and you're looking for a planned development in that R district, then right now the way it reads is that you have to provide 15 feet on all 4 sides.
And that's just for the dwelling units. So that actually would not apply necessarily to indoor parking or an amenity floor where there's like a workout room or a laundry room or something like that. It would be specifically for the dwelling units.
So the intent is to define, or we're saying we want a certain distance from the property line, we want a certain distance from dwelling to dwelling, if they're separate buildings, entities.
Essentially, you
then-
want to be able to have some kind of setback or buffer as needed, but
So
it's taken into account it's not going to necessarily be the same for every site.
Okay, so this only applies to residential districts for housing, basically?
Yes.
Got it, okay.
And so
I mean, I-
the request is, well, right now the code says it has to be, you have to be at least 15 feet away from the street or any other boundary line, and they want the ability to go lower than 15 feet. So have a zero, to allow the applicant to request a 0-foot setback in a residential district abutting another residential property.
But my point is that might be appropriate, given the context of the building in the rest of the area. Yeah.
It might, yes. So the applicant is Mr. Meter. Yes? So anyone else have questions of staff at this time, or can ask the applicant to make their presentation? Okay. Mr. Meter? Yes. Do you have anything you'd like to say in support of this application?
Yes, we're planning on building a 5-story apartment building, and the building is going to be lower than the other apartment buildings in the area. The setback will go to the lot line, but what's the distance from the lot line to the building to the north? 8 feet. Our density here is less than what's allowed. So the setback allows us to build 5 stories. If not, we're going to have to go higher, and then we're going to create a different type of construction quality, which then destroys the economics of the project.
Okay.
Are we reviewing a specific site, or?
No, we're not, and one thing I want to make clear is that our deliberations on this item as it relates to our code does not bear in any way on what our deliberations will be if and when you present the plan development application.
Okay.
Can I ask one question? So is your concern about future developments on contiguous or adjacent sites?
No, he wants to, he's planning on making an application for plan development that's going to be before us in, let's say, the next few months. And currently, because the property he's seeking to develop is in an R district, he's required to maintain a 15-foot setback from the property line. What he's saying is that the property adjacent to him, or to his proposed development site, provides an 18-foot setback on their side, and he intends to make his application such that it'll be a 0 setback on his side. Okay. Any other any questions of I'm sorry,
My
please.
name's Talar Barbarian. I'm the attorney for the applicant, and I did want to just specify again what the chairman said, that this application is for the zoning code as a whole and not specific to our PD application. And as Megan said, it will allow for, particularly in the case of the application that will be before you at some point in the future, and other properties like it, in higher density R districts that are predominantly residential, where we don't want to see spot zoning, it will allow for those properties to be developed in context with the street, as opposed to having a 15-foot requirement imposed on all residential districts, as they would be in a much lower residential district as well. So instead of imposing a consistent 15-foot setback on residential districts from the lowest density to the highest, this would allow the commission to consider lesser setbacks in higher density, or any residential district where that type of reduction would be appropriate.
Okay.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I presume you're all together and there's no members of the public? Okay. Anyone else have any?
So it's still saying, though, that we'd still have to approve any setbacks, right?
The city council would still have to approve.
Right. And it's-
It would still come here and still go to city council. And
But right now, it needs a supermajority to approve it, so you wouldn't need that in the future.
Well, right now,
Or it's not approved at
right
all.
now at a staff level, if a project does not meet that 15-foot requirement, we generally tell people to go back to the drawing board and reconfigure to meet that requirement.
Corporation Council has said that that is
Right.
not something that can be, it's not something that we can look at because the ordinance right now does not allow for that.
Right.
Okay.
And that's a more recent interpretation. There have been other developments with different staff that interpreted it a different way.
All right, let's look at the standards. I'm sorry. Do you want to have any deliberation before we look at the standards? Anyone have anything they want to say? No, okay. All right. Standards for amendments. Whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive general plan as adopted in amendment from time to time by the city council. It seems to me having the flexibility to make value determinations on projects makes sense in a plan development situation. I think this is satisfied. Commissioners, if you ever disagree with me, just go ahead and shout at me. Whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of the existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. There is no subject property, so I would say that this is not applicable. Whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties. Again, this is giving flexibility. We would make those determinations on a case-by-case basis, so not applicable. The adequacy of public facilities and services, not applicable. Is there any other slides that we're going to look at? All right, that's it. Any comments or questions from the commissioners? Do I have a motion? Halleck proposes to approve the amendment as presented. Do I have a second? Pagozzi. Since this is going to city council, we'll do it by roll call vote.
Okay. Commissioner Draper? Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Pagozzi? Chair Isaac?
Yes.
That motion passes.
Motion passes unanimously. It goes to the city council. And do the commissioners have any other business they wish to present to the commission? Hearing none. Any comments from the public? Hearing none. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Pagozzi. Do I have a second? Come on. All right. Draper. All in favor? We are adjourned.